1. During my time of working at a grocery store, I went through multiple managers. Some were good and I got along with them, and others not so much. The manager of this story wasn't the worst I've had, but I can definitely say she was the most annoying to deal with. She was one of those types that went, "I don't know your duties all that well, but I will micromanage you, and you have to do things my way," and got angry if we didn't do things her way, even if her way wasn't the most efficient. Around the time she started as a manager, a new store policy was being implemented about cleaning the small public bathroom in the back of the store every 2 hours. Honestly, I was not against that, as the public bathroom was only a single toilet and sink. A quick mop and spray wouldn't take too long anyway, and cleanliness was made all the more important when COVID first started. Unfortunately, my manager's micromanaging came into play even here. Basically, if the place wasn't clean enough to eat off of, it wasn't clean according to her. Yes, somehow she expected that level of cleanliness every 2 hours, whilst all of us are busy with our own work. It didn't help that occasionally there were doodles and other such on the walls that were hard to get out, if not impossible, with just normal cleaning supplies. I even remember that one time some guy used spray paint to do some graffiti in there. Anyway, one day it's my turn to clean the bathroom. At the time, it was considerably busy due to the lack of cashiers that day, as I was often used as a backup cashier at that point. I didn't have time to do such a deep clean like my manager wanted at the first 2-hour mark. A bit later, my manager apparently must have saw the bathroom herself and decided to pull me away to berate me. The following is an abridged version of what was said. "Why didn't you clean the bathroom? You were supposed to earlier." I did, but I didn't have time to deep clean everything. I had to help some customers at the cash register. There are some things I can't clean in there anyway. "No excuses. You're not a full cashier anyway. Now go back and clean it again. And do it right this time. I want it to be spotless. Don't leave until you're done." Aye, ma'am. And now it's finally time for the malicious compliance. As mentioned earlier, sometimes there were things on the walls that just would not come out with the cleaning materials we had on hand. Hence, why we usually had a cleaning company do such deep cleaning at night. This naturally resulted in not being able to leave, as I had no way of cleaning these things myself. So I just did my best to clean what I could, and then just sat on the toilet doing stuff on my phone. I had nothing else to do after all, and nowhere I could go. Of course, I wasn't mean-spirited enough to make the customers' bladders suffer for my compliance, so I did exit the bathroom when somebody needed to use it, but I went back in afterwards. All in all, I didn't do much for the next 5 hours or so. I just got paid for sitting around on my phone and occasionally cleaning. Hooray for having a charger on hand. The fallout outside of the bathroom was much more eventful. Turns out that a bit after I was sentenced to being in my bathroom jail cell, one of the cashiers decided to clock out for the day, and another cashier had called out sick. That left just one cashier, technically two, but one has to run the self-checkout, and my manager to deal with the horde of customers wanting to check out during one of the busiest days of the week. As expected, I was called over the loudspeaker multiple times to come help from that manager of all people, but I'm like, "You ordered me to stay in here, so I'm staying in here," and didn't respond to those calls. It didn't help that I knew she called because she just didn't want to do any cashier work. Eventually, that other cashier also ended up having to clock out for the day, so when normally me and the one who called out sick would be at the cash registers, my manager had to do this mostly by herself. Unfortunately, I couldn't see this in real time as I was in the back, but I do hope she had to suffer a bit from angry, rude and/or entitled customers. I ended up leaving my prison a bit after 8 p.m., which was after she left for the night. I hadn't had my lunch break after all, and I actually felt like helping after she was gone. During my next shift with her in charge, I got pulled into the office by her and sat down with another manager, I suppose as a witness or something. Once again, the below is the abridged version. "Where were you that day? You didn't respond to any calls and nobody could find you. You must have left this store." "I was simply following orders. Your orders, I might add." "What are you talking about?" You told me that I couldn't leave the bathroom until I made sure it was spotless. Well, it shouldn't have taken you that long. I did tell you there was stuff I couldn't clean with the supplies on hand, but you insisted. Even said you'd fire me if I didn't do it. Okay, the last part was a lie I made up to get the other manager in the room more on my side, but it also had the unintended effect of getting the micromanaging manager to nearly lunge at me, and she started full-on yelling at me. Despite willingly taking part in trying to piss her off with malicious compliance, I still had some anxiety issues, and they kicked in during this time. That was enough for the other manager to step in and stop this. In the end, I was just told I could go back to my normal duties and that I didn't have to keep the bathroom that clean. Unfortunately, my micromanaging manager didn't seem to get much more than a slap on the wrist. To be fair, it made sense as she didn't do much else besides yell at me, and there was no physical altercation. But even then, I managed to have some fun before I left that job for unrelated reasons, by simply watching her frustrated face, knowing that she couldn't micromanage me as much anymore. 2. Okay, so I'm born and raised in the US, and have always had a fascination with Ireland. I do have Irish ancestry, but my family has never been one to be vocal about it. We didn't do the stereotypical Irish-American St. Patrick's Day stuff, hang Irish flags, or put Irish blessings on the wall. I guess I got my love for Ireland looking through books. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents when I was younger, and they had a set of books about different countries. I would spend all day looking through the one on Ireland. The gorgeous landscapes, the stone walls, the cottages, it all fascinated me. When I was around 4, my grandparents, knowing my fascination with Ireland, gave me an illustrated book of Irish legends as a birthday gift, and it quickly became my favorite book of all. I would always ask them to read me stories from it, and my favorite was the story of Tír na nÓg. As I got older, my interest in Irish history and culture never waned, and I was determined to make it over there one day. And I'm happy to say I have accomplished that goal many times over now. Many of my friends there are like family to me, and we keep in close contact. Now, this was over a decade ago, but one weekend a friend and I were just grabbing some lunch and drinks at a local pub, and he was asking me about places to see in Ireland because I had just gotten back from there the previous week. I named a few spots, and this guy on the other side of me, who was old enough to be my dad, decides to butt in. "You even been to Ireland?" he said with a tone that suggests I have no business giving my friend advice on the subject. Yes. "How many times?" "Once." "Twice." "Oh," throws up his hands in mock surprise. "Why don't we sit at one of the tables there and I can school you on Ireland?" I smile and happily comply by getting down from my bar stool and sitting in a chair at the low table behind us. As he walks over to the table, I say, "As Gaeilge Céirt." In Irish, right? He looks at me like I've got 3 heads. I decide to start throwing some of his own shade back at him, and I say it more slowly. "As Gaeilge Céirt." Now, one of the things that I did before my first trip was take Irish language classes at our local Irish Cultural Centre. The classes were taught by a woman who was a native speaker from Connemara. I had also made a lot of friends with native speakers from West Kerry and Galway from my trips there, and they helped me with my Irish. He still stands there clueless, so with casual sarcasm I say, "Oh, I figured that since you were about to school me on Ireland, it would only be fitting that we have the conversation in Irish." Certainly, an expert such as yourself would have no trouble with that. The look of defeat on his face was priceless. The condescending attitude quickly disappeared like the air escaping a deflating balloon. His shoulders drooped, and he hung his head as he walked away without saying a word. My friend laughed his ass off, and we went back to our conversation. I've made 5 more trips to Ireland in the years since then, and the only disappointing part of any of it is not being able to stay longer. Now, just to add clarification, because some people thought I was rude for the way I spoke to him. In the US, when somebody says they're going to school you on something, this means they are going to make you look like a fool. They're saying I'm way more knowledgeable and better than you at whatever topic, and I'm going to prove it to you. It's a very disrespectful thing to say to somebody, especially a total stranger, in a conversation that doesn't involve you and you are choosing to butt in on. I never start fights, but if you bite me, I will bite back, Also, if you're upset by the fact that I decided to give it back to him, you're probably the type of person that craps on people and expects to be treated with nothing but respect in return. Don't dish it if you can't take it. 3. Many moons ago, I worked in a department store. It was a weekend contract gig while I was at university. It had departments for a variety of things, and for no particular reason, I ended up in the basement on homewares. No grumbles from me. Money, even if it is minimum wage, is money. Work was easy and my team were awesome. First week there, I recall someone saying, "Retail would be great if it wasn't for the customers." I was saddened. What a morose mentality to have for the place you spend most of your waking week. It took me a few years to figure out it was 100% true. The amazing customers absolutely do not outnumber or overshadow the monsters. One thing in retail I didn't realize was how amazingly helpful a good memory is. And believe me, back then especially, I had a phenomenal memory. We had to type in dissection codes and prices into a printer for barcodes and place them on stock. I very quickly got a reputation. See, most people would remember their specialty codes. They were 15 digits long. That is still good. A few seasoned withered husks with manager name tags would remember a few other specialities codes. I had them memorized for the entire basement, 7 departments, hundreds of codes. They were formulaic per department, so once you remembered each department's formula, you just had the last 4 digits per dissection. After a while of being noted for this, I got moved to cook shop, global knives, Alessi teapots, etc., into home care, electricals, vacuums, pressure washers, and irons. You think a good memory is helpful for printing labels. I was a walking thesaurus on that shit. I didn't gloat, but colleagues would use me often. Quicker to get die bay flaw than to go into the office and check the catalog or Google something. Warranty info, user specs, power ratings, maintenance routines, all of it. And I enjoyed the prestige. I wasn't a dick about it. I happened to be perfectly positioned to excel in this because of my memory. I would gladly help out people rather than salesperson them if I could. That $900 machine? What would you use it for? Yeah, you can get that from this $100 machine instead. I didn't get commission, and I brought return customers who liked me helping them. People liked a passionate teenage man helping them with all the knowledge I could muster. One woman even wrote me a letter saying she would send flowers, but didn't for fear of upsetting my wife if I had one. She was about 7 decades older than me, bless her heart, but I digress. Malicious compliance time. One day a woman came in. This was the naughties, but by today's standards a Karen. Instant hatred of everything and everyone. My job was to help customers, so her distaste for existence and pleasure for misery really mattered not at all. She is picking up various generator irons on the shelf, inspecting them and looking out of her depth. These things can be used in-home, and some of the models we stocked you could use professionally. They started at expensive and went up to crazy money. It was pretty normal. I would have to go through all of the specs for customers. If you were going to part with £249 for an iron, you want to know what you're getting for your money, I get it. So I walk over to her to help. "Anything I can help you with today, madam?" She looks at me like I am a fart who had just gotten into an elevator with her. "I want to buy an iron." Way to state the obvious, but the customer is always right, so I smile and go on. "What type of iron are you looking for? Are you using it at home or professionally?" "It's for me to use. I'm the woman of the household." Now, the way she stressed woman wasn't a gripe at her lot in life. It was more when someone reminds you this is their stuff, their speciality, their baby. Hey, no problem for me. I'll see if I can help with that. No problem at all. This model here is normally used commercially, and you cannot access the water tank. Since it generates such a lot of pressure, you have to use these CalStop cartridges to prevent limescale buildup. Otherwise, the machine can break and won't be covered by your warranty. The benefit is the dry steam boost function for doing dresses, curtains, etc. without soaking them. By comparison, this one has a cartridge water chamber, which is easier to manage. However,
"Yeah, can you get me a woman?"
Perplexed, I wondered what I said wrong. I needn't wait long to find out. She saw the look on my face and went on.
It's just a woman really gets these things. You clearly wouldn't know.
I'm chanting in my head, customer is always right, and managing my breathing to stay composed. No problem, ma'am. Allow me to get my colleague Doreen to help you then. Now, the department was built around a big pillar, irons on the east face, vacuums on the south and west face, till and accessories on the north face, so I walked around the corner to the till and got Doreen to help this delightful woman, who decided that I didn't know what I was talking about. I headed around to the west face to cover vacuums. Not 2 minutes later, I hear Doreen heading towards me saying,
Honestly, you need my colleague. They are the absolute expert on irons, and they know so much more about them than me. They will be able to help you find the perfect iron.
That woman's face as she realized it was me she was being brought to as the expert on irons was priceless. She fumbled a quick question on a Morphy Richards unit to justify coming back to me, then quickly hit the escalator to get the hell away from the awkward she had generated. 4. I had a job a few years back, and one of the worst bosses I've ever worked for. It goes like this. This one day in particular, I had arrived at work, same as my team leader's boss. I walk across the car park and in through the doors to our office, merely seconds after him. He doesn't say anything to me from across the car park, even though he saw me. He doesn't even acknowledge me at all. The time was 7:03 a.m., and I was supposed to start at 7 a.m., just like him. Later that day, my team leader gets an email from this guy telling him to give me a bollocking for being late. My team leader, who also happens to be a good buddy of mine outside of work, didn't give me a bollocking, but instead replied and told his boss that I regularly work an hour or so later after work and don't claim any overtime for it. At the time, I was young and didn't have any commitments waiting for me back home, and I was the type of guy who would want to finish a job before leaving. My team leader's boss told me that he didn't care that my working day started at 7 a.m., and he expected me at my desk at that time every day. He said he was sick of my relaxed attitude towards timekeeping. My buddy showed me the email back and forth between them, which he wasn't supposed to do, and just shrugged and said something like, "At least now you know, I don't give a shit. As far as I'm concerned, you do more than your stated hours, and he's clearly gunning for you. Just want your back." So I decided to take the boss's words to heart, and from that day until I left for a much better job, I arrived at work at 6:50 a.m. each morning, got myself a morning brew, and sat at my desk not doing anything until 7, when I would start work. Even when I got to the office early, I'd sit in the car park until it was time, and I left exactly on my finishing time at 3:30 p.m. every single day. The boss didn't notice, of course, until a few months later. A big job dropped just before home time, as they often did, and they needed someone to stay on. There was a usual rushing around and hushed discussions from the management about it, and then the boss came over and asked me if I would mind staying on to do the job. I was usually the guy for the job in these circumstances. Most everybody else had young families they needed to be home for. Now, I could have stayed on and earned myself some sweet overtime. I had nowhere I needed to be or anything I particularly wanted to do, but at the time he was asking me, it was only a few minutes to home time. I told the boss that I wouldn't be staying on to do the job. He asked why, and I pointed to the clock and said, "Because it's home time." With that, I shut down my computer, put on my coat, and went to leave. He asked me if I had something to go to. If I had plans for the evening or something, I just replied blankly, "Nope," and then politely said goodbye over my shoulder as I left. He was absolutely fuming, of course, but he had no power to compel me to stay, and he knew it. I found out in the days that followed that he blew his top and asked my team leader to gather my timekeeping logs over the past couple of months, since he'd ordered him to bollock me for being 3 minutes late. He wanted to haul me over the coals for something. When he realized I was keeping exactly the hours I was contracted to keep, he pulled me into his office and asked me why I wasn't being as committed to my role as I used to be, staying back late to get stuff done. I just smiled and very politely explained that staying late after home time for no pay is something that is done out of goodwill, and that he eroded all of that goodwill when he had my team leader give me a bollocking for being 3 minutes late on a day when I got to work at the exact same time as him. and I explained that from that point onwards my goodwill was gone, and I was only going to do what my employment contract asked of me, and nothing more. He was so red in the face I could tell he just wanted to lose his shit at me, but he had no legs to stand on. My timekeeping had been impeccable, and the work I was doing while at work had been to a good standard. He had nothing. All he could say was that he was very disappointed that I felt that way. I just shrugged and asked if there was anything else. There wasn't, so I got up and left his office. I kept my nose clean for a little over a year after that incident, but he was always trying to get me for some reason or another. In the end, I found a very nice job elsewhere, and I heard that after I left, about the entire department followed suit. 5. I worked for a company that provides specialized equipment used in manufacturing. To protect my anonymity, I'll have to be vague about what exactly this machine does. During my time working in this field, I got to know many clients who would need these machines installed and serviced. One of these customers was Jake. I later left the company for a different job, but Jake apparently kept my number. One afternoon, I got a call from him, and they wanted a new unit installing and another unit needed maintenance and wanted to know if I was available. I let him know I left the company, but that I could pass him on to someone who could help. He tells me he'll pay 2 times my current rate to install the unit over the weekend. It lets me know that the old company has increased the rates for installation and his company just can't afford it. The instructions they sent over just aren't clear enough, and their engineers are scratching their heads trying to figure it out. He begs me to consider it, and I agree. For more context, installing this unit can take a good few hours or up to a day on your own. The company gives you 2 options. You can either pay for an engineer to come and install it, or you can save money, and they will send instructions so the customer's own engineers can install it. The instructions aren't easy to follow, and it's company policy that if someone has started to install the equipment, the supplier wouldn't get involved since they couldn't verify that any of the pieces were broken. I drive down on the weekend and they show me the boxes of equipment. I get to work and I make good progress installing the unit. About 6 hours in, I'm stopped by Jake, who greets me. I let him know I'm nearly finished, and he tells me,
"Sorry, but they just don't have the budget to pay you."
He understands my frustration, but the engineers can take it from there. To say I was frustrated was an understatement. I wanted revenge. There's a small button inside the unit that changes the unit into test mode. This is done to perform maintenance, but it's impossible to configure the unit with this button pressed. It's only possible to reach this button using a pin, so it's not easily pressed during installation. Because of this, the installation instructions don't mention it. There's no real way of telling the equipment is in test mode. It just won't work normally. I think you can guess where this is going. I click the button, collect my things, and leave. Monday morning, I get a call from Jake. I declined. I knew my old company wouldn't get involved since I already started installing the unit. I knew his engineers would never figure it out. Just had to let him stew. A few days later, with many missed calls, I finally pick up. Jake is furious. He asks me where the hell I've been and why I hadn't been picking up the phone. He tells me they can't figure it out how to configure the machine, and they need my help. I tell him, "Why is this my problem? You won't pay me." He told me he was sorry and they would work something out if I could get there as soon as possible. I told him, "Oh no. You're going to pay me the £7,000 before I do anything." I'd never felt this powerful before. He screamed at me for a bit and hung up. He called back a day later after saying he's sorry for how he acted, and said that if I could come and fix it, he would pay me, in a totally defeated tone. He tried to fight it by saying he'll pay when I was done, but I was having none of it. After a bit of back and forth, he agrees to pay me. The money hit my account. I came in the next day. The look of confusion over his face when I took out a pin and changed the unit from test mode was priceless. It was even more priceless seeing his reaction to my picking up my tools and leaving after only 20 minutes of configuring. Easiest £7,000 I'd ever made. Don't try to mess with a professional problem solver. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 184. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, if you could please boop the like button and share the video around with friends and family members. Okay, we have a little birthday shout out to do today. And today's birthday shout out goes to Lucy. And Lucy is, I don't know how old they are today, but I hope you have a great day today. And since we're so close to the end of October, you can have the whole of November to celebrate as well. Just tell everyone I said so. Whatever it is you love doing, make sure you spend time to take a little time for yourself today. I hope you were lucky enough to get the day off. Hope you're not working or anything like that. It's always nice if you can do that on your birthday. Not always possible, I understand, but it's always nice. Okay. Now, I'm going to sing happy birthday. Then we might have a question of the day. I don't know, we might. I'm not sure. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lucy. Happy birthday to you. Okay, let's see. Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: if you could have a pet that was two animals smushed together, we've done fantasy pets before, but two animals smushed together, right? Maybe it looks like a combination of both, that has certain traits of either one, which would it be? I would like a tiger monkey, but just a tiny little one, because I did one in Stable Diffusion. That's the image generator I used the other day, and it looked really cool. Let me know what you think. Let me know why. Maybe you've got a better reason than I, other than it looks cool. And leave your answers in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.